AJ, excited to be visiting with you, brother. Molly introduced us. We're both going to be at her event in September, and she was just really super excited about the work you're doing. She's like, "You've got to talk to him," and we had a call, hit it off, and so really excited to learn a lot more about what you're doing, the need for it, because man, I don't think people realize how bad of a situation we're actually in, how fragile. So, if you don't care, man, give us that little elevator pitch introduction, and we're going to dive in.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me, Logan. I appreciate it. And Molly's amazing. Grateful to be connected with her and the people that's in her networks. Um, we built fromthefarm.org as an answer to what I was learning from interviewing hundreds of farmers and ranchers, including my family, that they need a competitive marketplace, a place that is focused on the prosperity of the farmers first, the ability for them to get their product direct to consumers, so the consumers can circumvent the need to trust or distrust labels. Right, you can go right to the source, ask them the questions that matter to you and your family the most, and really, and most importantly, create a system that makes it easy to get back into farming. Um, that's a that's a large statement. Farming's been under attack for decades, and we've been losing them, and they've been producers trying to find a way to be viable and all the things. But our belief and the way we built our system stems from that time in our history where we veered off from independent, 40 acres and a mule serving your community to corporate agriculture, and we live in the result of that now. But what if we went forward the old way, which was maintaining families on farms and supporting our communities from local agriculture? And so we're attempting to rebuild an agrarian society by making all that stuff in the middle, what it takes to get your product from the farm to the plate, simplifying that in a way that makes it doable for the producer, and then adopting practices that meet consumers where they're at as much as possible, right? The convenience factors and so forth.
AJ, let's start there though. Let's start with the consumer. Why in the world would just your average American family care? Like why is going to Walmart or Publix or Whole Foods or whatever and picking up the meat there not fine? It doesn't seem like there's a problem if you go in there. Maybe prices have gone up a little bit. But why
Sure.
do any consumers? Why should they even have this on their radar of conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, it should be on their radar because as a living organism, we have very basic priorities that should be top priority, right? Food and water, shelter and safety. And we live in a time where convenience and operational efficiency has kind of won the day. And so consumers have no clue about sustaining their own life, right? To the average consumer, average meaning mostly people in urban environments, right? That's where the majority of the population in our nation lives, is heavily populated areas. To that average person, they have zero clue how it was processed or produced, where it came from, what went into making that product available, that food available. We're so disconnected, um, and I don't think that was the intention, right, of the food system early on. I think it's just a convenient. The separation has become too convenient for big companies to not take advantage of, and so they should know, because first and foremost, that's your most basic requirement as a living organism, is to feed yourself. And so, in my mind, and it wasn't always this way for me as well. And my family have been ranchers forever, but I did take that for granted growing up. Um, we always had beef in the freezer that came from the ranch and just really didn't have to think about it. But that was because of how I grew up. But I lived in the city for a while, and then just recognizing that people really don't know. And then now, if they do become aware and they start looking into it, they should become very concerned, because we have lost so many of our producers and we rely on so few organizations just to feed us our basic needs, and that's not stable.
Yeah. No, no. I think the big thing that we hopefully can get across is just how fragile the system is. We're being fed by just a couple multinational conglomerates, and I don't think people realize that. And that consolidation and efficiency, like COVID, should have been a big wake up call for us. How fragile that system is and how centralized it is, but it apparently wasn't for whatever reason. But when I look at this from even the health implications, you can't compare beef to beef, right? Like beef that is raised on a regenerative farm versus a feedlot versus across the other side of the world. There's a lot of nuances here between the phytochemical content, right? The health of the animal, the omega 6 ratio, on and on and on, right? Like in some of them, I prioritize higher than others. But
Mm-hmm.
with AJ, can you go through how your model and what you're trying to do is breaking that centralized control? One more point as we go in here, and just you can have the floor, is we are seeing what appears to be some sort of a market manipulation on cattle prices. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely high right now to the point that a farmer financially would be crazy not to sell into the commodity market, right? Like the
Yeah.
money
Right.
is insane. Um,
Yeah.
so what we're doing when we fall into that trap is we're feeding the beast. We're losing more of our ability to feed each other, to feed ourselves, because we're selling into this model that is just ruthlessly efficient and can afford it, right? They can afford these prices. So how are we able to get around that? Which seemingly, like, I think maybe we're talking to some farmers right now. Why in the world would they care as long as they can raise the cattle, push it into the commodity market, and get a good paycheck?
Yeah, that's a great question. Specific to the producer side, um, if you are selling into the commodity market and you have been, you know that there's an 8 to 10 or 12-year swing because that market is being manipulated, right? There's very few that know that don't believe that that's the case. They all get it. Their prices are changing based on what the big guys can do or can handle. And so my my thought on that when I talk to producers is, we live in these really high peaks and really low valleys, and that's been a cyclical thing for decades. But if you build a direct to consumer business, yes, it's going to be a little more time consuming depending on how you set that up. But when you have a family's name on every ear tag on every livestock that you're raising, let's say that we could wave a magic wand and that's the future. Those peaks and valleys become rolling hills because you now have revenue that you can forecast pretty consistently because you have that buyer, right? The buyer at the auction is whatever mood they're in or whatever the overall market's doing globally, and that's going to shift what those prices are. But when you're going direct to consumer, there's stability there for a lot longer. And you also have that relationship that you're building with the consumer, with that end buyer. Whereas when you're selling in the commodity market, there's no relationship. There's no family that, like when my family, when we pray for dinner and thank the hands that prepared our food and raised it, we actually have family faces and names in our heads because we know the rancher that raised our beef. We know the producer that raised the pork. We know the dairyman that milked the cow that we're drinking. That, like, we have those direct connections. There's a ton of value in that for us as a consumer. But for the producer, they now have that direct relationship where people are counting on them for production. And as you start building those numbers, like producers that I know that have been doing this for a long time, especially if they go into like a monthly subscription, the stability they create in their business because they now have monthly reoccurring revenue that they can count on every month essentially. And if there's ever a problem, they might lose one or two of those customers, but the volume per customer isn't so high that it's a massive loss that they're now trying to scramble to replace, you know, uh, 6-figure buyer. It's like, okay, we just need to replace a couple of $200 orders because of attrition, which is natural. It's a much easier thing to manage. Does take some mind shift up front because you're used to going to that commodity market, but over time it can be much better. The other side of that too is people that are finishing their cattle, right? If you're going to the commodity market, you're at least in the area I'm in, A lot of these guys are calving in the winter, which is not natural. Nature doesn't produce babies in April in Wyoming, right? But in order for them to reach that certain weight that they need by August auction dates, they have to circumvent what nature wants just to meet the demand of the commodity market by a certain date. Well, when you get out of that market, the more you can start pulling out of that market, you can adjust a lot of things on your operation that are more in tune with nature's cycles and with your consumers. So there's a lot of things that start getting corrected. And the hard part I've found is that a lot of producers, they can see the BS in other industries, right? They can see how other industries manipulate. Like let's take big pharma. You can talk to a producer and like, yeah, that's a load of crap. But when we try to bring it back home to the same thing in the beef or commodity space for food, it seems that they don't tie the same intentions in their own industry, right? If a land grant university is completely funded by chemical corporations, chemical ag, and they're the ones teaching how to farm, that's no different than a doctor going to school and being taught by the pharmaceutical industry how to do medicine. It's the same thing, but sometimes it's hard to see that that's also happening in your own industry. And so we're just trying to help people break out of that and really connect the consumer to the producer. And you asked like what our model or method is, and really it's one that we are trying to give away more than sell. Now we have to bring some revenue in, but all of our decisions are based on what's better for the producer and the consumer. And so that's informed how we build this and how we develop it and what our role is. We want to help that producer. So if you go to fromthefarm.org, it's like an Etsy. Those stores are managed and owned by those producers, not by us. We just simply built uh, the town square for people to come together. And so when a customer buys from one of the producers on the platform, you're buying from that producer, not from us, not through us. We're not shipping it. They're shipping it or fulfilling it on their own. We'll build tools to help simplify that for our producers and consumers over time, which we have some of them in place now. But most importantly, that connection is direct. That's between the consumer who's eating the food and the producer who's growing it, because that's what a sustainable food system looks like, is those two people doing business. I saw this quote that a marketer should never make more money than the producer. 100%. The work of a producer is so much bigger than it is to get the product sold. And yet we have favored the marketer in the middle because they have those techniques to make those connections. So if we can bring those same skill sets in, but not need to make revenue there, then we can make sure that revenue goes towards the producers.
Yeah. We talked about this, off camera, where the need for like a small market, an aggregator system is really really important. Where you
Mm-hmm.
can have that one on one, that conversation, and I think that's as much as I want to hammer on the producers, the big retailers are just as ruthless as the producers, and so like it keeps going back to that centralization problem that we see over and over and over. And so, one thing that I do, full disclosure, I own a small market, right? That's what I do. This is my world. Is prioritizing, because they're both important to me, local or regenerative, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do we go regenerative and really support that? But what if the closest regenerative farm is 2 states over, right? Like that can service you. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose. So I struggle with this. So how do you view that component of local versus regenerative? Because in an ideal world, it's both, right? But that's just not
Yeah,
reality.
right. Totally. Yeah, I love that question because I've been kind of stewing on this for a little bit. I've been fortunate enough opening my mouth, opening my mouth enough and throwing a tinfoil cowboy hat gets a little bit of attention, and so now I'm working with three different groups out of DC, different divisions, and so I'm trying to make sure these, at least from my perspective, these guys are focused on what matters the most. And right now, because our inventory numbers are so incredibly low, like the food we're producing in America has been so decimated that I think the priority needs to be local or regional first, regardless of how it's being done. Right. Because listen, if it came down to it and there's, commodity beef on the shelf and nothing else, I'm going to feed my family because that's still going to have value. It's still food. It's still got nutrients in it that my family need. Right now, if we looked at a scale, higher diversity of forage, and they've got higher essential and non-essential amino acids and all of these things because of the regenerative side, well, then that's great. But if it's not even available, if we run out of producers and we run out of livestock, that's a bigger priority in my opinion. So I think, I was talking to a group that's been talking about certain things to help consumers identify nutritional dense food, but it would somewhat vilify some of the producers out there doing it conventionally the way they've been doing it. And I'm not talking large 100,000 head feedlots. I'm talking mom and pop finishing, 100 head or less on their own in their own feedlot. And what I keep telling these guys is, listen, priorities first. We have to increase the cattle herd numbers in our nation as a priority. We can split hairs over how to finish it and raise it down the road, but right now there is so little cattle left. If we're just focusing on beef, that we've got 87, 88 million head of cattle left in our entire nation, beef cattle. That's not counting, dairy, but beef cattle. And when you consider it takes one full beef to feed a family of 4 for a year, we've got essentially enough inventory to feed 87 million families in a nation that has 340 million people. So that's kind of my thought is, let's put this in order of priority. First, we need to rebuild our herds, which means we've got to make certain policies change so cattlemen can carry more cattle. Like, let's say in the West, we're controlled by Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service. The vast majority of the land in the West is under Department of Interior, and they determine how many livestock the cattlemen can carry on those leases. And that's essential to prevent, overgrazing. But really, that yes, there are some people that have, that are overgrazing, but by and large, the producers that you'll meet out here, they know how to manage the land for ecology, and they're working closely with their, government range cons employees that are there to help kind of manage those things. But then it gets to the DC level, and whatever special agenda is going on, they're reducing the amount of animals that they can carry. And so, for example, some of these guys can only have one cow calf pair per 100 acres. Well, if you understand soil biology and the need in a brittle environment to put rumen in the soil, that's a needle in a haystack. One pile of cow manure for 100 acres, essentially. So even if a cattleman, and I've met them, they know how to manage the land to rebuild soil biology and soil, those kinds of things, and regreen the desert, create regenerate local water cycles. They can't do it anyway because when they go and ask to do these certain things, they're told no because now policy's in the way, right? So the problem is vast. That's why we're trying to get involved in multiple angles from the farm. Like, I could go ahead and build the platform, but if policy keeps going the way it's going, the platform won't matter because the producers can't produce, right? So we have to get involved in multiple areas. And so, yeah, we need to prioritize the rebuilding of our nation's herds. And I believe that there's enough people now aware of and connected to regenerative agriculture or holistic management or whatever you want to coin that phrase, that those are going to come anyway, but we need to get the policies in place to where we can rebuild our herds first. So those are my opinions on that. And in the meantime, because there are plenty of people doing regenerative, if you are in a position where that's what you're aware of it and that's your focus, then go and find them. They're out there. But our nation as a whole should just be prioritizing the return of agriculture, and separate it from the commodity market as much as possible.
Yeah. AJ, let's go a little bit into There's so much that what makes this conversation so unbelievably complex is there's so many interconnected principles. You just the 1 cow per 100 acres just kind of blew my mind. Because if you look at the work of Alan Savory, I think this is textbook for why that's a terrible idea. This is not how we build soil. The idea of building our herds and not being able to build our soil almost has a negative feedback loop, especially for the West,
Yes.
or some of these more arid or brittle environments. So, man, goodness, dude. The policy it's just like every time I think I despise politicians enough, they do something else. So what do we do? Because they're not going to save us. So that's obviously going to be on more of the public lands.
Hmm.
But so what do we do on private lands? Because that's where we have the control, right? Like, so
Yeah.
how do you see this building of the herd in a way that we're able to do that without depleting, right? Like, because it's
Hmm.
raping and pillaging is how we've been doing agriculture for the last 100 years. So how do we do that in a way that I mean, that's why I'm so drawn to regenerative. How do you see that, AJ, as an encouragement to do things in that right way, or regenerative way?
Yeah. This is where the partnership between the producer and the consumer is crucial. Producers will increase what they're growing if they have demand. And they'll do it in a way that's respectful to the ground they're producing on. Or they'll lease more ground so they can expand their operation from, folks that are retired or whatnot that have the ground but aren't producing on it. But that demand has to come from the customers first. They have to start choosing where they want it to come from, because every producer I know is more than happy to increase whatever they're producing if the demand is there, because there's a need for it. And so that's one thing, is to get those folks connected, get consumers connected with the producers and have them shake the hand that feeds them, so that there's confidence on the producer side to increase what it is they're producing, to to maybe they're full max capacity on their ground. They're like, man, I have no problem leasing more ground, but I need to know that it's going to pencil out that there's a demand. So consumers getting behind this is one thing. On the consumer side as well, we've seen that for all the downsides of social media has given producers a really loud voice when issues come up, and we've seen consumers rally behind producers when certain policies or something is threatening their operation. They rally and elevate that problem to a level that's unignorable online, and we can stop things. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. We kind of like, it's like, all right, we now know the playbook. You put out this stupid policy. Me and a group of you know I'll use it. I hate the term, but influencers will disseminate that information to our followers, and now you've got all these phone calls coming into to the local switchboard of the person that's trying to make those decisions, and it gets stopped because they're like, oh, we stirred the hornet's nest, right? But
Well, I think
one
you
of the
just described
challenges,
decentralization in media, right? Like, this is exactly the same thing we're talking about.
yeah, yeah, I remember having a conversation with my uncle a while back that the chicken industry got destroyed because the only way to market early on was if you had the budget to compete in newspaper ads or commercials or whatever. How else are you going to sell? But now with social media, where most people are spending their time, I don't know anybody scrolling through social media that their feed is Tyson and Cargill and JB, right? It's this family farm or that's who's coming up. And so producers now have an opportunity to get their product out there. It'll take time, but it doesn't necessarily take money if you're consistent. So like for what we're doing, my own social media has been a huge asset in growing and expanding this message and what we're trying to do, because that's where the people are. And it's been easy to put that out there and bring people into the ecosystem that are listening for what we're doing, right? We only need 3 to 10% of a population to create a movement. So we're not worried about convincing everybody. It's fine. We'll put the information out. You make the decision for you and your family, but we only need 3 to 10% of the population to change something. And so we're focused on those groups. We're focused on those people who identify as a patriot, who would love to see this country be what it's capable of being, what God made this country to be. We're not entirely proud of either of our political parties. We look at policy more than politics. We have the ability to carry two opposing views in our head at the same time. So I might be able to disagree. I might disagree with you on something, Logan, but I'm not shutting everything else you have to say down because of that one thing. Like, cool, we disagree here, but man, Logan's onto it. He's got right. So those people are the ones that we're going to where you might disagree with me on a few things, but overall you get that connecting back to the source of where your food comes from is better for us as a nation and a people overall. And so those are the people we're messaging, those that still believe that God put this country aside for something wonderful, and we can still make that happen as a people.
No, I agree. The time is perfect for that too. I think that we've got so many people that are tired of being sick that realize we've been lied to about everything. I mean, the amount of propaganda that goes into you need to hide from the sun and meat's going to cause cancer and heart disease, and just raw milk is going to unleash a pandemic. It's just it's unbelievable. And as people, the reason I bring up the raw milk is because we were able to get probably the best legislation in the country passed in Arkansas
Yeah.
on raw milk and the ability to do butters and cheeses and everything. And guess what? The ERs aren't full. The ICUs
Yeah.
aren't full. Like bird flu did not wipe out Arkansas, right? Like
Yeah.
like we're here. And but what we are hearing is my gut has been changed forever. It's completely reversed. I'm not, fill in the blank, constipated, gas, whatever. It's big, and so like as more people realize they've been lied to, right? Um, it becomes more and more evident. I think that it's people are waking up. I just, it's more than food. We've talked about this a lot, but food's a big, big deal, and it is a national security threat in my view,
Mm.
because we
Yeah.
cannot feed ourselves right now. Like we are solely dependent on these corporations. I don't think people realize that, AJ. So, like, why is it so important to do like these conferences like Molly's doing, the Food is Medicine conference at Sovereignty Ranch? Like, why is it so important that, you're leaving Wyoming, I'm leaving Arkansas, we're going to Texas, we're getting together with a bunch of people from MMA fighters to, Will Harris and everybody in that space and all kinds of people that care. Like, why is that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I think it's an opportunity for us to continue to get the message out into groups, like your message, my message, each of the people coming into groups that are listening for it so they can have an alternative source of information to question either what they were or were not told. And so those really help. Also, from another perspective, as somebody who presents at these conferences, the ability to network with folks like yourself, we can't beat the system dollar for dollar because they own all the dollars, right? The lobbyists are controlling the policies and so forth. Last year they passed the Sustains Act, which allows private corporations to openly give money to federal organizations. So, in other words, JBS can now give the USDA $1 billion for special programs use. Well, does anybody ever say no or slap the hand that's giving them all kinds of money if certain policies may be made? No, not at all. And even if you look at that timeline, the Sustains Act, it passed in during Biden, but then the largest donor to the inauguration was Pilgrim's Pride. Pilgrim's Pride is owned by JBS, the world's largest meat organization, most corrupt. You can just go Google JBS
Google.
lawsuits. And then 2 months after that, 3 months after that, they get approved for the SEC approves them to be publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And so, two different administrations, two wings of the same bird, but now you've got these things that are stacking up. And so, yes, that concerns me, but I'm not as concerned knowing we have social media to push back, right? We have, I've said, okay, fine. If you're going to go play that game, the government, if you're going to play that game, big ag, big commodity, we're America first everywhere else except agriculture. Fine, whatever. But just don't get in our way. How about that? If you're going to do that for them, what you can do for us is just not get in our way. You know, don't put any policies in place that are going to prevent local producers from selling to local consumers. And if you do, we're going to rally behind that and make that very well known. Like what happened in Oregon. They were putting reviews and policies together to see how or what they were going to allow in terms of on-farm U-pick or ecotourism or farm stands. Now, they weren't trying to pass rules to stop them. They are in the early process of deciding who can and can't. If you're a patriot of the mindset that I am, is just don't be involved at all. Just pass food freedom laws and let consumers decide. That's the right way to go. So whatever policies you're creating, those are still more policies. And maybe they start out one way, but the problem is you open that floodgate to having some level of control. Who gets in office next could certainly determine what that outcome is the next time. That may not be really good for us. That's the concerns. Like anything that they're doing under Trump that is or isn't good, the next group that comes in, how do they build off that if they can make it worse? So we have to get to a decentralized model where the consumer has the agency to choose where their food comes from. I heard it described like this: the difference between food sovereignty and food security. Food security is just simply having something to fill your belly with. If that's, you know, MREs or C rations or whatever from a bunker that's been stored up for emergencies because we're in famine, that's food security. Soylent Green is food security, right? Here's your fake meat, but at least we're sustaining life. It may not be a healthy, functioning life, but we're sustaining life. That's food security. But food sovereignty is our right to choose what we eat. And if we take away the locally grown food that's high in nutrient density, we've lost our sovereignty because now we don't even have a choice. And that can be done through different methods, right? Whether whether you make it so impossible to be viable as a farmer in the state that you close up, or you put limits and restrictions that don't allow you to sell enough to even make it work, right? Those are the things that we need to keep an eye on as a consumer, right? As people. And that's the main thing: is consumers just need to understand that we are talking about your most important basic need, which is sustenance. So
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, it's all laid out right there.
yeah,
So like, it's another thing that I want to try to emphasize is that sovereignty and food freedom is literally being attacked by every single level. So whether that's the producer or your processor, like a meat processor, we're losing the smaller abattoirs, like they hardly even exist, right? And then they add legislation on top of that. You have to be USDA to be able to retail the meat, right? And in every state, is a little bit different. But it's just like the cost of compliance is labeled on everything. Like one thing, we have a law for, like, if you have 99 hens, like, you're fine. But if as soon as you get that 100th hen for eggs, you fall under this whole other category, and we're going to come down on you. Like, what? Like, it's just insane. Like the raw milk laws, where there was a 500-gallon a month cap. Like, you could buy it directly from the farm. They can't deliver it, set up at a farmer's market, or bring it to you. You have to go directly to the farm, and the farm can then produce 500 gallons a month. Like, what does this have to do with public safety? Like,
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
like
it's insanity.
yeah, it's like the 6 foot apart rule. You know what I
If
mean?
COVID didn't wake you up, like, you're not going to see this until it's too late either. And that's what's really terrifying to me, is like it did not wake as many people up as I thought it would. And all of it is interconnected, every single aspect of it. And so, to me, it's really, really simple: be healthy, be healthy.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
realize all the lies that we've been sold, and eat local, seasonal, and natural food. Meat is not the enemy. Like, and that local and seasonal aspect, it means support whoever is in your community. That doesn't mean you need to get everybody needs a big name, Polyface Farms beef or White Oak Pastures, or fill in the blank with another group that's doing great things. I'm not hammering on them, just like support your stinking neighbor to grow the food and do that in a way that's making things better and not worse. It's like if we just did that, we'd have a
Yeah.
different world, AJ.
Yeah, 100%. We did see an awakening during COVID, but it was short-lived. People have short memories, right? There was a huge shift, and the percentage of people going direct just really took off. And now it's leveled out, and if not leveled out, it's even dropping a little bit because that short-term memory. And the other side of it too is the conversation around the cost of food when you buy it direct. But when you have to understand that we have been trained to see food and purchase food based off of its weight and not on its nutritional density. And so you might be buying, 3 pounds of produce, but if you analyze that produce from the grocery store, it's probably completely void of nutrients. And so you bought 4 pounds of nothing, right? Just cardboard, essentially. You might fill your belly, but you're not getting the nutrients out of it that your body needs to be functioning. And so there's this conversation that has to shift where you either pay the farmer now or you will pay pharma later. And what that means is as you age and your genetics in your body, if you have good genes like I do, your body will forgive you for a lot of your transgressions if you've got good genes. If you don't, you'll wear them on your sleeve pretty easily. But ultimately, what we're talking about is as you age and your cell regeneration slows down and you can't recover like you once used to, what you're feeding your body is going to start showing itself in chronic health issues and other things a lot more. So now you get into your 40s, 50s, 60s, you're going to spend a lot more money trying to stay alive than you would have if you invested that in high quality and nutrient dense food early on and fed your body so that you have this healthy functioning organism that can do the things that you need it to do to sustain life, right? And I don't know about everybody else, but I'm looking at this world saying I have zero expectations of any sort of social security being available for me when I get older,
Yeah,
right?
negative.
That means I'm working until I die, which is what I'd prefer anyway, because I believe that's, you know, we are part of nature and nature has a way of moving unuseful things out of its way naturally. Um, but you're going to end up spending a lot more money trying to keep yourself, alive as you get older, which means you're now not functioning enough to continue to provide for yourself when you get older. So there will be a trade off, and folks just don't know that it's an investment now. And that's what it is. It's an investment in your long term health. Um, you look at the breakdown of a cost of a bag of Doritos per ounce compared to high quality nutrient dense steak. You're paying a lot more for that bag of Doritos than you are that meat. But we have been fooled. We have been trained to not fully understand the proper balance in what we should be investing in and what the long-term ROI is of that investment.
And AJ, we're having less and less people make it to those ages you laid out. So like making it to 60 in the short term is likely to be a challenge for most
Yeah.
people. And the food again is a massive part of that, but the environment we live in, and as we keep being more technologically centered in every aspect of life, if we get further away from nature and God's design and live more of an artificial environment, it's just going to keep getting worse. Again, another multifaceted aspect. Man, what do we do on education for for the producers? Dude, this is the other thing. We're losing producers. Like this is
Yep.
I went on 10 and I get called all kinds of names and conspiracy. It was pretty interesting little message I just got right before we jumped on here. We are losing farmers on so many different levels, from the financial hardships that they face. Suicide is absolutely running rampant throughout our farming and agricultural communities. The MS, Parkinson's, all of the neurological degenerations happening. And so, like, there's this health component of is like, well, they got to make money, they got to be healthy. Okay, so what do we do? And my buddy Jared Lumen's got the Herd Quitter podcast. I think they branching for profits. I think he just changed the name, but Jared and I were talking, and it's been a while back. But I was like, dude, how do we do this? And he's like, man, I don't think they care. I was like, oh, awesome. Well, in that case, we're doomed, right? Like,
Yeah.
so what do you think on that? Uh, Connection between health and making money, because like just ask Steve Jobs, how important is that money?
Yeah.
I,
Right.
how
100%.
important is that money when we're dead, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't understand the disconnect of why we don't care. And because our farmers are our frontline warriors, they are the militia of 1774, right? Like we need them so bad, and there's just a disconnect. Now I just don't understand it. I don't get it.
Yeah. Again, I look at it going back to like, again, it's the same thing as what, without them knowing it, it's the same thing that our doctors deal with, or aren't aware they're dealing with. The school they went to, the training they received was bought and paid for by somebody who had a vested interest in them using their products. And so and then when that gets handed down from one generation to the next without questioning, because in, in the ag space, there's still a strong, at least in the networks I've been in, there's a very strong connection to God and creation. And in the ag space, it's like the respect of your elders, right? My dad, my mom, my granddad, my grandmother. It's like to question them is wrong. Um, and if I question them, then I'm not a good son, or I'm not a good grandson, or whatever. And so I feel like there's some of that in there, like they're afraid to question what dad did. I've met a lot of producers that come from mom and dad who ranch and farm a certain way, and then they get wind of this other way to farm. And when they try to implement the new methods, it causes division in the family, and then they end up having to leave and go lease and start their own ranch because that isn't accepted. Like, this is how we do it. This is how it's always been done. That's why they say the 7 most deadly words in agriculture is this is how it's always been done. Well, that's not true. This is how it's always been done is for a window of time, because how your great granddad did it, this is not how it was always done. He would have told his son, this is how it's always been done, until some dude with a lab coat shows up on his property, sprinkles some magic fairy dust, and he gets 2 times the yield, but that guy doesn't bother to say, the consequence, though, the good and the bad. Here's the pros and cons. The pros are you're going to increase your yield quite a bit. The cons are we're going to destroy your soil biology over time, and you're going to need more and more of this down the road. They weren't told that. They were only sold the upside, and they weren't given all the details about the downside. I've had conversations with producers where it's like, what makes good beef? A good nutritional, beef, a healthy cow. Okay, cool. What makes a healthy cow? Good forage. Yeah, got it. We're on the same page. What makes good forage? Good soil. Okay, I'm still with you. What makes good soil? I don't know. NPKs, inputs, and it's like, have you ever heard of a water bear? Right? Water bear is just an easy one because I'm not going to forget that one. And do I know all the soil microbes by name? Absolutely not. Water bear is easy to remember. If you don't know what a water bear is, which for those that don't know, it's a microscopic organism that looks like a chubby bear that's crawling through the soil and building up soil organic matter. Just one of, what they say, in a teaspoon of soil, there's like there's as many organisms as there are stars, or a tablespoon or whatever. And we don't even fully comprehend what they all do. Right. And so there's a break there. If you know that good forage makes a healthy animal, and a healthy animal makes good food, and good food makes healthy people, but you don't know what's going on in the soil that God designed, not the lab, but what God designed, and you're not familiar with how that influences everything else, then there's a disconnect, right? When you meet the people that studied from soil all the way to the end, they're an expert in their field because they've said nothing is out of my purview. This is my job to steward this land. I should understand all of the components. That is no different than a doctor that breaks out of the system and says, I'm not going to give you the mRNA because I'm not bought and paid for. This just happened in Utah. There was a doctor that people were asking for a placebo, and he was filling out their vaccine cards as being vaccinated when they were forcing vaccine cards to go to work. And the doctor was just giving them basically saline and then filling it out for them because I have an informed choice as a human being. I don't want this in my body. And the doctor was like, you're right. These people are evil. I'm going to, do this differently for you. He almost went to prison, and this was just 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they finally threw the case out because post COVID and all the things we know, that guy saved numbers and numbers of people. So I see it the same thing. You have to be willing to, be willing to question. Start there. I'm willing to question. I'm not going to change anything, but I'm willing to question and open up my field of view to other ways of doing things. And then those that do, they're making more money. I mean, let's talk about what matters first. They're making more money because they're using less inputs. They're selling a higher quality and nutrient dense food, which consumers that are read up on that will come to you. They will ask you for those specifics, and they will pay you more because they know the amount of work it took in to do it different and the impact it's going to have on their body. They know it's an investment. And so those folks will come find you. But you have to be willing to question the system to begin with, to be able to see that.
To me, this is the only way. Like this is the only way. Nobody's coming in to save us. Nobody in Washington cares about solving this problem. They don't. It's just like what you explained about it. The JBS. Like, really. So if we got to be healthy. We got to prioritize, in my opinion, livestock agriculture in a regenerative way. That's how we build the soil, right? I think you talked about the water bear. I think Ray Archuleta was on a while back. He had a shirt that had one on there, and then Matt Powers, I think, is absolutely incredible on that soil focused work. Like, we we create resiliency by doing those things. Like, we eat it, we live this natural way of being outside. Like, I can't stress that enough. I know that sounds like a wackadoodle to anybody that may have not listened to me before, but like, the sun is the most important thing for biology. You be in it. Ask a plant, right? Grass doesn't grow without sun. So like, and neither do we. Like, we can't. So that prioritization of regenerative livestock agriculture and allowing small markets to thrive, or direct to consumer, to where they get that, and everybody becomes more healthy, the soil becomes more healthy, the resiliency is built. This is that snowball that we have to have. And for me, like, your work is pivotal. Like, this is the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we really feel that way, whether it's, whether it's from the farm that gets across the threshold to be successful or not. I just want people to know that it's not about from the farm, although we hope that we're successful because of the resources and the people we're serving and so forth. But it's not about from the farm. It's about the model. And the model is what has to happen. This model of direct to consumer, you shake the hand that feeds you. That producer, Will Harris was one of the first people on our platform. And we do not move the needle for their operation. They're very successful on their Shopify and the other stuff they're doing. But the reason they joined us is because Will said, AJ, if you figure this out, this is what we need. There's no reason I'm sending beef from Atlanta or from Georgia to California when there's 5 million people down the road in Atlanta. That's a stable food system. Everything I produce should be going into the state of Georgia. There's plenty of Californian producers that they should be serving as many people as they can in California. That reduces the emissions of transportation. It reduces the input costs of getting it from the ranch or farm all the way to the customer that it belongs to. each of those input costs take more money out of the producer's pocket and the consumer, because they can't eat the shipping cost. The consumer has to pay that. But if it's a local operation and it's a local pickup, or they meet at a farmer's market and just hand over what they had, or they meet at a local grocery store where they can drop it off, that consumer can go in, pick it up, and do the rest of their shopping in a local market. That's the system that needs to be created. Again, whether it's my business or somebody else's, that's a future where farms thrive, and so do the communities that they're serving. And then when you have the situation like we had during COVID, we've got a decentralized food system. So the store shelves being empty are far less of a concern for as many people as we can connect directly. When the store shelves were empty, if you already were buying direct and you had a relationship, that was one less major stressor that you had to worry about. But if you lived in a city and you didn't know that connection, and you walked in there and it said, one package per customer, look what happened with toilet paper, right? All of a sudden that scarcity mindset kicks in, because as a consumer, you haven't shored up your most important need, which is food and water. So now your stress level and everything else you have to worry about is a distraction from the thing you're trying to do. But if you knew your farmer, that was one thing you were not worried about. You were worried about all the other things, but having access to food wasn't there. And that goes a long way. That peace of mind goes a long way. That's why, like right now, I'm trying to encourage people, fill your freezers with a share. Cattle prices are going way, way up. We closed the Mexico border because of the New World screwworm. So that inventory that was making up the difference of what we didn't have in our nation's herds was coming from there. Well, they closed the border. Now that's starting to catch up, and now the news is talking about highest beef prices that we've ever seen. Well, yeah, because we took for granted our farmers and ranchers for so many decades that we are dependent on foreign inputs. I don't think JBS is worried about that, because they'll just backfill everything from Brazil. But that is why the prices are going up. And the only way we're going to be, it's supply and demand. The way I see it, the only way we bring prices back down is by giving producers a reason to raise more, so that we rebuild our domestic herds, so that there's more inventory to meet the demand. Otherwise, it's going to keep going up. So because it's going up, I'm telling folks now, freaking connect and fill your freezer. I have no idea what this is going to look like in a year. I don't think anybody does. Your whole animal 3 years ago, you probably could have got for anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000. Now you're looking on average between $4,000 and $5,000, in some cases $6,000, depending on where you live. We might see it $8,000 or $9,000 in a year from now, just because supply and demand. There's no product. We lost 20,000 ranchers a year every year for the last 5 years. Where's that? So that, and the only place that's being replaced is by foreign inputs, because I've not met many producers that are holding back heifers. And for those that don't know, those are female cows to breed. They're selling them at auction because they're worth more than they've ever been worth at any time. Now, somebody at the auction might buy those and keep them as breeding stock, but a lot of them are getting bought and turned into meat because there's the demand. And so the replacements that we need to build our herds are being sold into the beef supply chain. And now we're cutting off our legs, cutting ourselves off at the knees to have what we need in the future.
All right, brother. Where do we send people to be able to find meat close to them and utilizing your platform?
Yeah, if you go to fromthefarm.org, that's where you can search for producers. We've got just under 100 producers across the nation and growing. So we're pretty proud of that, through 35 states. If you're a producer, we would love to talk to you. If you're concerned about going direct, if you're nervous about it, we can help you walk through what packaging you need to get the product to folks, how to list it so that based on what we've seen, whether you're going to sell quarter halves or wholes, so whatever your unique operation is as a producer, we can offer some insight from the work we've done with all these other producers to help you. So if you're just nervous about going direct, or if you're just starting, we would love to have you join us. When you join from the farm, you're not just joining a software. We are producers. We've been connected with producers our whole lives. And so we're trying to take this on multiple angles, not just getting the product sold, but how to reduce your input costs on on packaging, reduce your inputs on getting it shipped, all the things that producers need. We built this because when I was selling direct, nothing existed that answered the problem as a whole. It was, most of the things out there are very specifically just software. But producers have far more issues that need answered than just good software. And so we're here to serve. That's it. God's called us to serve. We keep walking by faith, connect consumers and help them shake the hand that feeds them, and help producers build an online business that they can thrive on.
Brother. Yeah, looking forward to getting down to Texas, hanging out, and man, thanks for taking the time and putting in the work, because I know it's the work, man. But
Yeah.
thanks for jumping on, buddy.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Logan. Appreciate it.